Well, welcome everybody. I'm Tony Hughes, co-founder and sales innovation director at Sales IQ Global, and welcome to the CEO Sales Insights Show. I'm really excited about the guest that we have today, Max McLaren from Red Hat. I'll introduce Max formally in a few minutes. We're on LinkedIn Live today, so I really encourage you to type any of your questions into chat. They'll be pushed through to us in StreamYard, so this will be your opportunity to ask some questions also at the end of today. Please also go to the Sales IQ Global website, where if you haven't already registered for this event, I just encourage you to do so, and we'll push you a copy of the recording. Sales IQ Global brings you the CEO Sales Insight Show, and it's the world's leading sales enablement platform. We've got a brilliant course that specializes in helping sellers fill their top of funnel opportunity pipeline. Our sponsors for today are Ring DNA, who are the revenue operations platform that uses AI to transform sales teams into high-performing revenue engines. They're the leading choice for companies such as Salesforce and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and also Amazon Web Services, and amazing integration into Salesforce. Ring DNA offers a complete solution for sales engagement, sales playbook execution, performance insight of sellers, and conversation intelligence, and much more. Our other sponsor today is Trigger.ai. That's Trigger without the E, Trigger.ai. And Trigger is a sales intelligence platform that turns the internet itself into your opportunity funnel, mining for companies that fit your ideal customer profile, and then trigger events that occur that are monitorable, again, using the internet as your real-time database to give your sellers relevance and contents and context in driving their outreach. It's how you can hold your sellers to account for proactively generating opportunity pipeline. Well, the CEO Sales Insight Show is all about helping aspiring leaders and CEOs, directors of organizations, to inspire them and help them drive top-line revenue growth. And if you're a salesperson, this will also provide you with some insights on how you can get the attention of a CEO. We all talk about elevating engagement and selling into the C-suite, and the conversation we'll have today with Max McLaren will really help you do that. So I really encourage you to take notes, and again, please put your questions into LinkedIn Live. So I'll bring Max in a moment, but just to introduce Max, Max is Regional Vice President and General Manager, Australia and New Zealand for Red Hat Asia Pacific. And Red Hat is without doubt the global leader in open source software. Some of the biggest banks in the world, actually most of the biggest banks in the world, biggest government departments, corporations are using Red Hat to drive down costs, to improve operational efficiency, to be able to deliver innovation to market faster. Just an amazing business. And Max himself has over 35 years experience in leading and managing tech sales and marketing teams worldwide. He's been leading Red Hat Australia and New Zealand for over 15 years. Prior to that, an amazing career with IBM. He's an executive who is proud of the fact that he's built successful teams, and I've had the privilege of working with his teams for many years. Amazing positive team and sales culture, very customer-centric. But Max has done a brilliant job in attracting and retaining the best talent in the marketplace, as well as driving the attainment of goals with focused, regular review for execution. And I know that Max has been one of the highest performing managers within the Red Hat organization globally. So without any further ado, I'll actually bring Max in. Max, welcome, and thanks for giving us your time today.
It's a pleasure, Tony. Good to be here.
Mate, thank you. Hey, how about to kick off? Would you mind providing a little bit of a brief overview of Red Hat and the value proposition, and also how you go to market, what your organization looks like, just to contextualize the conversation today?
Sure. So Red Hat's been around for just shy of 30 years. 1993 we started, and we started out with putting, for some of the younger fellas, they won't remember these days, but used to stick CDs on the front of magazines and send those out, and that's how you got your Red Hat Linux. And then, some smart people in the organization, one of which is still here, Paul Cormier, who runs the organization now, figured out that enterprises could run this stuff. It wasn't a hobbyist sort of thing. And so we started doing the whole testing of making sure that Linux would work with hardware and software. And that was the kickoff of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And that was in about 2002. And that really was the start of Red Hat as we know it today. And to your point, it's become a 5 billion odd business now. And I would say about 60% of that business is probably Linux. I'm talking about in the ANZ context. I'm not quite sure of exactly worldwide. But, we've since then acquired a middleware technology organization called JBoss and evolved that over many years. We acquired other organizations, for example, the virtualization engine that is in OpenStack KVM, and evolved that into a virtualization play, and then OpenStack, and the world built a sort of a private cloud solution based on that. Probably the biggest acquisition was a small little technology that we started a little almost sandpit where developers could come and start developing online, and that's evolved into our container platform OpenShift, leveraging the power of containers like Docker, but a variety of others, and of course Kubernetes is the orchestration engine that we worked with Google in making a reality, and then Ansible, our automation technology, which we acquired in about 2011, and has now become the largest automation of effectively compute, storage, security, and a variety of other automation processes, integrating it into other technologies. So a variety of technologies, and effectively what we do is we make open source consumable. Originally, as you said, we just drove down cost. We were a good enough alternative to some of those very expensive proprietary solutions. But I think over time, open source has attracted developers, and as a result, a lot of the innovation in the world now happens in the open source community. And Red Hat, because we're so connected to those communities, is able to identify, I suppose, the big movers in that space and put our efforts behind it, and then legitimize it, and as I say, make it enterprise consumable. And so, as you pointed out in the introduction, banks and airlines and utilities and governments, et cetera, rely a lot on what we do. And effectively, we coined the phrase many years ago, hybrid cloud, which has now become sort of a de jure type comment, I suppose, for how organizations run, even those organizations that were born in the cloud and only ever provided cloud. But as I said to a CIO of a bank one day, when he said, we're going all in to the cloud and that's all we're going to do, I said, that's interesting. So your core banking system on your mainframe, what are you going to do with that? He went, well, apart from that, obviously. And so, my point is that there will always be, in most organizations, large organizations that is, I suppose, a variety of different platforms. And our value proposition to organizations today is, how do you optimize the way you run and manage and build all the, for want of a better term, digital transformation type value propositions to your customer base and your employee base, with that cloud as a platform, right? And figuring out where best to run it and how to optimize the way that runs across a variety of different platforms.
And Max, what's the profile of your own span of control with the organization that you're running?
Well, as you said, I've had a varied career, and I was in Southeast Asia and South Asia with IBM. I'm running the Lotus business for many years, and then I was lucky enough to get an offer to come down and run that in ANZ, and I really liked it. And so when they gave me the option of moving to a very small organization relative to IBM at Red Hat to run ANZ, I was pretty excited. We had no presence in New Zealand, and now it's a significant part of our business. And I quite like the fact that I don't have to fly more than at best 5 hours to Perth and just run the ANZ business. And to be able to work in an environment that's I'd say pretty innovative. I mean, I think we're relatively early adopters of technology, and that's been the case in Red Hat. You know, we were some of the very early adopters of cloud computing, for example, and how we leveraged and ran that in ANZ. I think it's been a fabulous go. And I used to be part of a group of CEOs, and I said, Max, you must have been the longest serving CEO, or I'm a sales director effectively, of an organization in ANZ. And I probably have been, but it's been a very different job every year that I've embarked on it.
Yeah, Max, and you've obviously seen a lot of change. So, in what ways has revenue generation models changed within the software industry, and where do you think it's going?
Well, we were probably the first, anyway, major organization to embark on the subscription model. So, traditionally it was a license-based model with renewals or maintenance every year. And that was tough. I remember, in some of my early days at IBM in Australia, trying to convince CIOs that despite the fact that they'd parted with millions of dollars the year before, they needed to give us another 10-15% the next year when they hadn't deployed a lot of it, right? And
Yeah,
so the value proposition of the subscription, which by its very nature was substantially less than a traditional license model, endeared us to customers. And I think that's been a big evolution. Many organizations
yeah,
have adopted that. And we know a lot of the relatively new platforms are desperate to try and evolve a subscription model, because that annuity model has been very lucrative for us, because traditionally customers renew, every year.
yeah,
The great thing about open source is they don't have to. They can stop using us today and still continue to use the software. It's a perpetual model for that. They don't get the updates and fixes that we provide, and they don't get the support and all that other stuff that goes with a subscription at Red Hat, but they can still use the software. So I think it's an attractive value proposition. And then, of course, cloud today is creating a very different market. I think the hyperscalers have created a great marketplace. Organizations are finding that constructing a procurement process with a cloud hyperscaler has been sort of attractive. Interestingly, ISVs, kind of like Red Hat, you can buy Red Hat value propositions on the marketplaces of the hyperscalers and use those today, and many organizations do. I found that appealing. And it's interesting, I think we're seeing effectively the hyperscalers almost evolving into traditional distribution land in terms of
yeah.
what they're being able to facilitate.
Max, you've had an amazing career. There's a lot of salespeople that watch this show to try and gain some insights into how to approach someone in the C-suite. But before we talk about that, talk about your own career path, because your career path through leadership included a lot of selling, right? So this
Sure.
gives hope to anybody in selling. It's
Sure.
a great path in business.
Sure. I was lucky enough. I stumbled into it. I grew up in Zimbabwe, did a degree in marketing, Bachelor of Commerce, majored in marketing at the University of Natal in Pietermaritzburg. And then I went overseas and did the normal stuff, barman stuff, etc. And I thought, man, this is hard yakka. But I managed to find a mate in a pub who offered me a job as a sales rep in one of the very first IBM PC dealers in West London. And evolved through that very early stage of I suppose the PC revolution. And then I got into in those early days I realized that hardware was becoming a bit of a challenge, and that cost was the primary definer of whether they bought it from me or not. So I moved into software, and I sold accountancy software, and then I progressed into working for Lotus, selling Lotus Notes, and probably some of the best times of my life, because effectively, my professor at university told me that marketing was business. And what was interesting, I was being exposed to a huge amount of business in selling accountancy software and then selling Lotus Notes. And I could almost walk into any organization and provide them with a solution to some of their deep down pains. And, getting to grips with understanding how organizations run, understanding their pains, I think is an exciting thing. for an inquisitive mind, which I think most of us have. And being able to help solve those problems is wonderful. And effectively, that's what you do as a sales guy, right? Or girl. You're solving business problems. And I think by being able to do that, and also, along the way, actually make a few bob, because it's been a lucrative career for us. I started with literally nothing. I had no money in my back pocket. I had to borrow money to buy a suit for my first job, and it's paid us a good living over time. So I think selling in the IT world, effectively solving business problems, is very exciting. And if you get that right and are able to do it, and it's harder and harder and harder today, because they're so complex, all those problems. But if you can get to do that, you'll be a successful salesperson.
So Max, there's some great wisdom there for everybody watching this. So for anyone in sales, be genuinely curious. It's such an important trait in life. Be genuinely curious about the world of your customer. Think about the real problems that you solve. So something that's a serious problem. Otherwise, there's not going to be serious money available to actually solve it. And turn up and have some insights. So, you've heard from Max. He really gained some insights into how businesses were running, and he could take that to any customer he was talking to. So, Max, let's talk about leading an organization, because one of the reasons I think people that enter sales have got such an opportunity to progress into leadership is that any buffoon in business can cut costs, right? And there's so many things that you do as a leader and that all CEOs do. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is to drive top-line revenue growth in a way that really sustains. And a big part of your role, and any leader's role, whether they're a smaller business with a board that they report to, or for yourself, you're reporting up into an overseas boss. What's your advice to leaders that are watching this right now in managing the expectations of their board or the boss above them, especially when it comes to forecasting?
Yeah, there's a lot in that question. Let's take the last bit first. I've had the adage that what you see is what you get. You've got to be authentic, and you've got to be able to balance being pragmatic and authentic and deliver the message, and also sell the vision of positivity for the future. As sales reps, you're trying to convince your sales manager that you understand how to close this piece of business. And we can talk about the process of getting there in due course. As a sales manager, you're effectively trying to sell to your boss the vision of we've got this, we figured out how to do this. These are the key deals that we're going to close, and you can trust my forecast. You got to deliver. But I've also never been afraid of delivering bad news. I think that's important. You can't keep delivering bad news, otherwise you won't be delivering any news for multiple quarters. But I think that's the practicality. Getting there is the complex beast, right? The forecast, I think, is the end point. Getting there in terms of how do you build the business, how do you continue to drive top line growth? Red Hat's been an aggressive growth company, and we've to deliver high double-digit growth for years in order to convince the market that there was something in this open source thing. And then we actually got a bit of a following, and the share price went up pretty high and ended up with IBM paying $34 billion for us.
$34 billion. I think at the time it was the highest valued acquisition in the IT industry, yes?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah. It's certainly software anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, incredible. And Max, I really agree with your comment that as a leader, we shouldn't be afraid of delivering bad news. I think it's so important that we deliver the bad news early, not late. And for all of the sales people watching this, I'm sure Max will agree with me, because I've also run the region for North American multinationals in my life as well. But bad news early is usually something we can do something about. We can find another deal to try and plug the gap. We can maybe go and turn things around if there's a problem. But bad news late and negative surprises just make people's heads explode, and it really damages the credibility of everybody.
Sure.
So
And
Max, yeah,
I mean, the forecast is the outcome, right? So,
yeah.
I think it's important to have a plan, to communicate that plan, to show progress in meeting that plan. Finding great people, keeping great people, beginning to evolve opportunities to build the pipeline that gives confidence to your senior leadership that you've got this and you know how to run it and build a business, right?
Max, you just talked about finding great people. How would you describe the sales culture that you've built in your business? Because you've delivered sustained double-digit growth, not off a small base, off very big numbers. Anybody can talk about, hey, we've got this percentage growth, isn't it impressive? But it's only impressive if it's off a big base, right? And you've
Mm.
been working with a big base and still driving amazing growth. A big part of that, as I look at your organization, is the culture that that you and the team have created. So how would you describe that culture? And then at a secondary level, what do you look for in sellers and your sales leaders?
Sure. I think, culture and people is the primary value proposition that we can deliver as effectively, the sales organization of a product company. Having great products is the key to the door, right? One that helps you attract customers, which helps you attract sales reps, etc. So, a long, long time ago, I learned that, as salespeople, we only have ourselves to offer organizations. And if you feel you're good, make sure that you work for an organization that's got great products. Fortunately, at Red Hat, we've got great products and have done and consistently grown more and haven't sat in our laurels, a lot of organizations have done and then faded into, um, history. But I think people, and it's trite, but it's absolutely fair dinkum. People are the critical success factor if you've got the right products. And we've tried at Red Hat, we've had, because of the open source nature of the organization, a very authentic, open, collaborative type organization. Our previous CEO, Jim Whitehurst, would be at a sales kickoff and come and sit next to you and have a beer or have a bite to eat. And you wouldn't know that he was the CEO if you didn't know who he was. He'd just be a genuine, straight up guy. And he would do that more than once. And that was the nature of the organization. And I think, because we were a little different, because we had started creating some success in ANZ, we attracted good people. And, I don't try and run a culture where, we've heard of the organizations that naturally want to get rid of the lowest 10% every year. That to me
Yeah,
is bullshit, right? You know, you're dealing with people's livelihoods. Make sure you try and find the right people, that you coach and develop them,
yeah,
and that you're authentic and open with them so that they feel comfortable about being authentic and open with you. And to my point earlier about forecasts and surprises, etc., they'll feel comfortable. We still, unfortunately, have the odd sales rep that's scared about putting an opportunity into commit, and they leave it in pipeline until the last minute because they're worried about inspection. We don't inspect. We try and help,
yeah.
to build and develop and progress those opportunities. That's our objective. Inspection is, as far as I'm concerned, again, an anathema. What you really should be doing as sales leaders is helping sales reps be successful, and that's progressing opportunities, progressing careers, building capability through coaching and developing. And we've tried to keep that the primary culture at Red Hat. For a long time, unfortunately, we had a relatively flat organization because we were, very widely spread. So we didn't have a lot of opportunity to develop people into senior roles. So some people have been in sales roles for many, many years and have been comfortable. Their careers have changed dramatically from running, 50 to 100 accounts now to probably running one or two, and being very successful at doing that. And that is progression and development for those people as
Yes.
well. Fortunately, we're now a reasonably large organization. We've got 250-ish to 300 people in ANZ in the sales services marketing organization. And so we've been able to develop from within and build a good culture of leaders. And they've all come from the field, majority anyway, as salespeople into sales roles, if not with Red Hat, outside of Red Hat, and have spent a long time at Red Hat and evolved into that culture. And people genuinely are surprised because we talk about the culture all the time at Red Hat, but I think we walk the talk in terms of delivering on that too.
Well, Max, I really love that, because I've always believed that culture is nothing more, nothing less than the lived values and the manifested behavior of the leaders. And I really love that comment you made a couple of minutes ago about, if someone's not performing, we need to look at ourselves. We need to use a mirror as the first diagnostic tool and be able to look ourselves in the eye and say, we've done everything that we can possibly do to help this person be successful. It's so easy to blame the employee. It's our job to remove the roadblocks and set them up for success. So, yeah, I really agree. Yeah. Hey, Max.
And we do often have to have performance improvement plans for reps that aren't making it, right? But absolutely, the objective is, let's between us try and figure out whether you've got the ability to do this, and we'll do everything in our power to help you get there. But sometimes it might be better for you and less stressful for you personally if you decide that it's not the right thing for you, and it's not right for everyone, right? Not everyone can be a business problem solver and a sales process negotiator to close an opportunity.
Hey, Max, I've just seen a question come in from Brendan asking, what's your view about finding the right talent today? We know it's increasingly difficult to find great salespeople. I guess within the IT industry, it's difficult. What's your advice about finding great people today in the software industry?
Sure, and I think almost every profession is struggling with finding the right people at the moment, but IT in particular, and in ANZ especially, because we haven't had immigration for a couple of years. But I think sometimes we're guilty in the industry of plowing the same furrow and looking for people in the same space all the time. And, recruiters often do this because I appreciate it's easy to sell the capability to the future employer that this person's done it before. But I've often found good salespeople come from left field. Some of my best salespeople have come from related, but sometimes relatively unrelated parts of the industry, or if not in new parts of the industry. And, I think selling is selling. And I think we should maybe broaden our aperture a little, especially because we're all struggling to find good people. And as I said earlier, I think you can earn a good buck in this industry if you're reasonably successful. And I think you can earn probably more than in most industries as a salesperson. So I think we should broaden that aperture a little, and we're trying, so for example, in Canberra, not in the sales industry in particular, but in technical roles as well, we need consultants, right? And we need technical salespeople. And so we're working with a partner in trying to find veterans in the Army and the Navy and the Air Force and bring them into our organization. They can go, we've got a great learning services organization, and so they can do all the enablement and get some of the certifications. And as a result, we can give people roles that have probably not been in the industry before, right? And so I think those are the sorts of things that we've got to get better at doing. And I think other industries probably have done that better than the IT industry. One of the hard things is because of the technology requirement, oftentimes we think that is as a prerequisite. But I do think we might need to broaden our horizon. Obviously, in technical sales roles, that might not be the case. But I'll never forget the first time I went for that role as a sales rep, and I picked up the PC magazine, and I thought, what the hell are they talking about? But you did a whole lot of work to equip yourself and enable yourself, and I was vociferous in terms of my study to make sure that you could get up every day and actually impart some wisdom.
Hey, Max, I'm seeing lots of questions coming through. We've got people from Spain, the USA. There's people I've known for years. Bryn Hughes, hi, mate. It's really good to see you tuning in here. Hey, there's a question from Bryn. He's asking, what are the leading indicators, Max, that you tend to focus on from a metrics point of view beyond the traditional things of sort of pipeline?
Gee, we've tried to do a lot of work in this regard. I've evolved what I call a recipe for success in this industry where you're given the products, right? So let's take away the manufacturing part or the development side of the business. But effectively, as a sales leader, director, you've got a few levers to pull. One of those is coverage. How do you optimize the coverage of the market? The traditional pyramid of going to the top, obviously for the big dollars to begin with, and then eventually broadening that. And we've been trying to do that for as long as I've been at Red Hat. And then it's almost a conflict. How do you evolve some focus within that regard? How do you build productivity within those people? How do you continue to develop capability, sales capability, technical capability? And then I was lucky enough to, as I said, major in marketing, and I'm a passionate believer of marketing being integrated with sales and making sure that we integrate and go to market together as a coordinated marketing and sales organization to build opportunity identification and then evolve that into a pipeline. But we also try and do things like, what are the critical success factors at progressing an opportunity from A to Z, and making sure that we measure whether we're doing those or not, for example, right? So I think there's a lot of key performance indicators that you can evolve across your business that are leading indicators towards that pipeline and that forecast, and focus on making sure that those are being done, and those are being done consistently across the organization.
Yeah, Max, I really agree with that, and I know that Red Hat focuses strongly, for example, on account planning. With these important accounts. So things like doing account planning to truly know the customer, focusing on what creates deal progression. Time stuck in stage, because the thing we all know is that between opening and closing is the middle, and the middle is often where deals can stall or die. So I know that you and your leaders focus very much on how do we create progression. Are we creating the right commercial value for the customer to sustain their motivation? Do we really understand their process? Have we achieved consensus for change? So all of those things are important.
Yeah,
Hey, sorry, Max, go on.
The quick one, especially when it's so complex today, and the opportunity to solve a problem has so many different solutions. How do you help the customer identify the best one? And I think we work really closely with our services team as well, and our technical sales teams, to make sure that we help doing that opportunity identification piece, and then that exploration of the opportunity with the customer, to make sure that they understand what the problem is. Oftentimes they don't.
That's right.
And then we can overlay how we solve that problem for them.
Yeah, that's great advice. Hey, Max, in a moment, we'll pivot in a moment and provide some advice for sellers, for the salespeople here, of how to get to a CEO, someone like Max. But I've got a question here also from Nikhil. He's saying, working for a global company, how do you manage global expectations around growth, especially in the last 2 years where the market's been very tough? So how do you manage those expectations around revenue growth expectations?
Yeah, I think I alluded to it earlier. I think you've got to evolve a recipe and a plan for success. You've got to make sure you sell that, and then you've got to execute against that. Now, it's tough to find new business in this virtual world, right? And you can't go and have a coffee or a bite to eat with a prospective customer or partner and evolve opportunity that way. So that has been very tough, and I take my hat off to my sales team and my marketing team for doing that. But we've just tried to pivot towards doing much more virtual events to try and replace what we've done that way. But you just got to sell the vision, and if you don't have the pipeline, if you don't have the plan, it's hard to sell that vision. You are selling a vision about how to do it, and Yeah, I mean, it's been rough. You know, I
Yeah,
can't say it's been easy for me either, because sometimes the numbers don't quite add up, right? And the
yeah,
vision for what you've been given as a plan, and what you can deliver, sometimes are ways apart. But as long as you're progressively getting closer, and
yeah,
organizations can see that you're progressively getting closer. And I don't think anyone's naive enough, even above us, to appreciate that it's a perfect world at the moment. So if you're making progress, you're growing faster than your peers, etc., then you can allay some of those concerns as long as you fair dinkum. I think you know
yeah.
don't, don't bullshit. Be fair dinkum. Tell them the bad news. Tell them the
Early.
good news, and show them that there's a few bells and whistles at the end of the day.
Yeah, and Nikhil, obviously the reality is for many of us running a region is we can do as much bottom up planning and presenting what we think the number should be after we just get a number imposed on us anyway, as part of a global growth strategy. And we're just told, go and find a way. So obviously we just need to manage those expectations. I agree with Max 100%. Hey, Max, let's provide some advice for sellers. So my first question is this. If you think about your average week, how often do you get a phone call from someone trying to sell to you in an average week?
Oh, a couple of times a week, I'd say. One of the things that I'm not really asked to do is to be a big procurer of stuff, right? So
Yeah,
we have lots of functional organizations that support us for offices and IT and all that other stuff, right? Um, hiring has been one of the areas that obviously I've got some insight into. But again, we've evolved our own internal talent organization to do that. So I get a lot of those calls, and one of the things that I think sellers need to appreciate is you are getting a lot of those, and so how do you differentiate? The
yeah,
thing I dislike the most is people that assume I know them and I don't. So that's hard. I think got to be respectful in terms of how you approach someone, and just again try and be fair dinkum. This is what I do. The last thing you want as a seller is to waste your time with someone that doesn't have a budget or doesn't have
yeah.
the responsibility to acquire things. So try and get to that nub really quickly, qualify that really quickly without being assumptive, and that would be my recommendation, right?
Max, I'm really with you. I'm really with you. I remember when I was running the APAC region for a multinational, I'd get bombarded by recruiters. And we had a policy in the company where it was all done in-house. So I couldn't use an external recruitment agency at the time. And the first thing that annoyed me was this disingenuous friending kind of approach from a stranger. So, that didn't work well. But I would literally say to them, look, you're selling to someone who can't buy. There's a global policy in place. I can't use an agency. And then they just keep selling. And I'd say, you're not listening. You're trying to sell to someone who can't buy from you. But if we could say, and it just gets annoying. So yeah, definitely people need to listen. So there's definitely some good advice there. What's typically the best time of day to get to someone in your role? You've got hundreds of people, lots of
Yeah,
managers reporting up to you. And in the days of pre-COVID, I guess the travel time in and
yeah, that's
from
always a
the
good time.
office was a great time.
That's
But
always a good time.
now that we're not doing the traveling, when do you think's the best time for someone to get to someone like you?
Yeah, I wouldn't know, because I would imagine everyone's day is kind of different, right? Um, but not too early.
Okay.
um, but I don't know, eight, half eight probably is good. 5:30. I don't know.
Okay. So sort of the shoulders of the day.
Okay. The middle of the day, you're generally involved in something, right?
You
You
are okay. So
want
okay.
the last thing you want is someone to disturb you while you're trying to shove a sandwich down your mouth in the half an hour or 10 minutes that you've got in between meetings. Yeah,
Okay, so the shoulders of the day rule for
I'd
getting
say,
to C-suite executives is still true in a world where people aren't traveling in and out of the office every day. Okay,
I'd say so.
and in your view, no earlier than 8 a.m. So if it was earlier than
Oh,
8 a.m.,
again, I think
possibly
I think it's hard to impose on people's time. If they've got kids, they're probably in the school process, or at least trying to feed their kids and whatever else, right? So that's always tough. Um, and so you've got to respect those sorts of things. And I think, you know, we are humans. We're all humans, so just pay
Yeah.
respect to what humans should be doing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Hey, let's maybe change the topic a little bit. What's your advice for contacting you and not getting delegated away? Right. So what are the types of things people need to talk about that resonate with you as a leader?
I think I alluded to it earlier. It's all about the issue that you're faced with, right? So, for example, my business would be growth. Um, again, I get many people approaching me because they think they can find me a whole lot of prospects.
Right.
You know, I'm not trying to be disingenuous, but why do you think you're better at finding prospects than my sales organization? So some insight, I think, is important, right? Having
Yeah.
a little insight into how the organization runs, and then being able to pick up on an issue that I'm likely to be facing, um, and then try and break through. My point is, as a sales rep, I always used to try and do this, do the homework, and that can take a while, and then make the call and have it really, really lined up quickly. Hi, Tony, Max McLaren. I'm from so and so, so and so. I think you've got this issue. Am I right? I think I've got a solution. I can do so and so and so and so and so and so. Simple as that, right? And I could say to them, sorry, I don't have that issue. So and so might have that issue, or they could say, is someone else responsible in your organization for that? But just straight up, I don't think you need to have any camouflage. For
Okay.
most organizations, people are busy, but I think most sales people, most procurement people, actually do appreciate that if someone's done the piece of work and hit you with something that's on the money,
It's
you're
relevant.
absolutely going to give them some time, right?
Yeah. Okay. Hey, Max, we're just getting close to wrapping up. Have you got any great examples, good or bad, of sellers trying to gain the attention of someone in the C-suite? So something you thought, wow, that worked really well, or gee, that was a big miss.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a few procurers that have come through to me and they just nail it because they've correlated what the issue is I have very quickly. So I remember, for example, there was a graduate procurement organization. I don't know if they still exist. They were called Prograd, and I'll never
Oh,
forget them calling
yeah,
me, and saying, "We know it's really hard." This is many years ago. We know it's really hard to find good salespeople. Have you thought about building a graduate trainee program? And I'd say, sure, but it's hard. And they said, what happens if we could help you with the hard bit and just give you, as qualified graduate potential hires as possible? And I thought, shit, that's a no-brainer. Would you mind spending a day with us and being part of the process to go through weeding out some of the good grads? And I was in,
yeah,
again, it wasn't something that was top of my day in terms of an issue. It was something at the back of your mind, and we weren't a big organization at the time, and so we didn't have the capacity to build our own graduate trainee program. We're beginning to do that, especially down in Canberra in our services business, and have been for a number of years now, and progressing those people through the organization, which is very exciting. But we didn't have the capacity to do that, and so they hit me with something that, as I said, probably wasn't top of my mind, but
yeah.
if they made the assumption that I probably did, and so
And
they
they're
hit,
on the money. Yeah,
yeah, and
that's
they
great.
were straight up. There was no bells and whistles. It was just, here's the value proposition, Max. Does it resonate or doesn't it?
Hey, Max, I'll just go to one last question from our audience. Thirumalai, and I hope I pronounced that name correctly. And Max, you just talked about professional services. I know a big part of Red Hat's revenue is services, although you're very partner centric. So your channel or your partners generate huge numbers of services around Red Hat as well. But the question from Thirumalai is, what about forecasting professional services versus product? Do you think there's any differences or things to consider there?
Gee, I would say it's almost easier in the professional services business for our guys to forecast. They've got two challenges. They have to forecast revenue as well as bookings. But
Yeah,
I think generally the opportunities are a little bit more developed when the professional services guys get engaged, in our business anyway. So I would say it's almost a little easier. And I mean, really, it's basic fundamental qualification. Go through the methodologies. There's thousands of them out there. I remember the very first one I had: need, willingness,
yes,
authority, budget, competition, right? And you just go through the process and figure out whether you've qualified it according to the methodology that your organization uses or that you personally use. And I think you've got a better chance in the services space because there's probably a little less competition. It depends. I mean, sometimes services are quite generic, but in
yeah,
our software business, it's quite specific. So it's a bit harder. And yeah, absolutely, we use a lot of partners. They oftentimes have been doing, multiple services engagements for
yeah,
that customer, and so they're probably closer to the customer in terms of understanding not just the requirements, but also the process to close stuff, right?
yeah, yeah. And Thirumalai, the other thing I'd encourage you to think about is that any professional services organization is very familiar with project plans and actually building out a Gantt chart project plan. Apply that thinking to your selling. So actually create a mutual plan with the client as soon as you can in the selling process so that there's no nasty surprises. So we're all aligned with timing and process for actually getting the deal done. So,
And
hey,
also
yeah,
that sales process, Tony, generally there is, identifying the opportunity, qualifying it, and then proposing it, right? In
yeah,
very short terms. Make sure that your process of qualifying it is solid, because
all right.
that's the piece that allows you to forecast correctly.
Yeah, especially making sure the customer's got a strong business case for securing approval, because at the end of the day, they're going to be competing for resources and funding internally. So I really love that. Hey, Max, we'll just wrap up. So I'm assuming the best way for people to connect with you is in LinkedIn. So Max McLaren in LinkedIn. Yeah,
Yes,
great.
absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And Max, here's my last question. If you could go back in time to meet the 25-year-old self, what advice would you give yourself? I'm assuming you were living back near South Africa then at the time.
No, I
You
was
were
in the UK at the time. I
London,
was in the
UK,
UK
and London. Okay.
very early days, and as a sales rep in those very early days, one of the things I think you don't appreciate is that you've got something to offer organizations, right? Depending on how good you are, that offer is much bigger or smaller, right? But be confident. Be confident in you as a commodity that you can bring to an organization. And as I said, as long as they've got good products, and you need as a prospective salesperson, or whatever, to do that piece of work, that homework, to identify just how good their stuff is, be confident that you are a commodity, and that they need you just as much as you need them. And I don't think we appreciate that. Um, uh, it's kind of like dating, Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. As a guy, anyway, you were always paranoid about what the girl would think about you, right? And it's the same as a sales rep. You've got both, them needing good salespeople with good capability, and you needing a good company with good products, so that if the two get together, you can be successful.
Max, it's funny you use that analogy. In my book, Combo Prospecting, I've got a little piece in the book about how to be the hottest one at the bar. And it sort of does that dating analogy, right? But it's so important as a seller that we don't come across as needy or desperate, and that we're just all about the other person, because you're right. There's mutual benefit, right? So we definitely don't want to be needy, and we all need to drop the need to be liked in life, right? The reality is, hey, we can either genuinely help the person or we can't. Let's not waste each other's time. So I really think that's great advice.
I talked about capability earlier. So as a salesperson, your primary capability is your ability to qualify. So if you haven't done it, make sure that you gen up on one of the processes. There's 100 out there. I love solution selling. We're using Medipick at the moment at Red Hat. Just make sure you gen up on that, and that you're confident in how you apply that to an opportunity.
Yeah. Max, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're incredibly busy. You run a phenomenal organization. Great leader. Thanks for being on the CEO Sales Insight Show, Max. We really appreciate it. And for everybody, please make sure you go to salesiqglobal.com. Make sure you register for this, because it'll secure you the recording of this and a transcript beyond what you're seeing in LinkedIn Live. So thanks everybody for attending. Thanks for the questions that came through. Sorry we couldn't get to all of them. And I'll see you on the next CEO Sales Insight Show. Thanks, Max. See you, everybody.
Pleasure, Tony. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.